So last week, the leaders' debates took place for the Canadian federal elections, and all of the parties' identities are pretty clear. The Bloc Québécois represent the interests of Quebec, whatever those are. The Conservatives represent Anglo-Saxon culture, that is American liberalism and corporatism. The Liberals represent globalist rule, and that's not a good thing. That's anti-Canadian, despite what the Liberals themselves say. So all of the parties' identities are pretty clear. All of the parties, that is, except for the NDP. The NDP is so bland, so characterless. They were really disappointing. I really wanted to have something positive to say about them. I looked at their social media and website, but it's really hard to find something good to say about them. So the NDP is desperately in need of an identity. A lot of people seem to equate the NDP and the Liberals, saying that they are both parties that are on the left of the political spectrum. And then whoever appears to be more centrists for a particular time will appear more reasonable. But it doesn't work this way. They have, identities which are concrete, and the Liberals have already defined their identity. That is, Canada is post-national, it is universal, belongs to the world, right? Post-national, that was Justin Trudeau. Being universal, who was it? Stéphane Dion said that. No core identity, that's again Justin Trudeau. State influx, lack of unity is its strength. And the Liberals are about multiculturalism, so all values are the same. The Liberals have thus already positioned themselves, and this does not change from election to election. Like it's that saying, the words don't matter, it's the actions. Well, with the Liberals, it's the same thing. Like, so what makes the NDP's lack of identity so terrible is that they have no excuse for their blandness. Many Canadian intellectuals have attempted to build the NDP, such as renowned Canadian philosopher Charles Taylor and George Grant. Charles Taylor was even served as the vice president of the federal NDP and was president of its Quebec section. So the substance is there. There's just no response from the party in the public space. So here in this presentation, I'll briefly zoom through the main points of an essay by Canadian philosopher George Grant, which is called Equality and the NDP, which was written around the time that the NDP was formed. So it's still, it's like over 60 years old. The first thing George Grant highlights is that we now live, for the first time in human history, in a mass society. Human beings grow up in conditions where physical survival does not take up most of their time. And in such a condition, what then will give life meaning and purpose? What is worth doing when robots are doing the work in the factories? In a society of widespread leisure, aimlessness and boredom will be much more likely than in the past when leisure was the privilege of only a select few. This means that the most pressing problems today become increasingly less quantitative and progressively more qualitative. And although we cannot deny that there are still many quantitative problems in Canada that the old socialist ethic of egalitarian material prosperity can address, we need to recognize that society's most pressing problems today have become increasingly qualitative, questions that call forth judgments as to which activities realize our full humanity and which inhibit it. So, implicit in this, you need to have a vision of the human good, of what it is to be a full human, right? So you start making good bad judgments a lot more than we allow ourselves to in our society. We see the unwillingness to address qualitative problems with the rise of bullshit jobs.
a lot of them. He talked about technological unemployment in the 1930s, and a lot of people thought, well, it wasn't really true. Everybody's been saying the robots are going to take our jobs, for the last 100 years or so. Unemployment stays about the same in the long run. Well, maybe it's not such a threat. But I would make the opposite argument. I would say, the robots have been taking our jobs for the last 100 years or so. But instead of replacing instead of redistributing the labor in a reasonable fashion, we've simply made up completely meaningless, pointless jobs. Either industries that just have no purpose to exist other than their own existence.
Yeah, we work for the sake of working because we can't value anything else. So George Grant makes 3 points in his essay. He brings to light the roots of equality and shows that it is nonsensical without a higher principle, that is, a moral dimension. He discusses how state capitalism is a farce and how the capitalist ethos is pernicious for modern leadership. Obviously, this isn't, communism or anything. This doesn't mean to do away with the economic system of incentives and even of wealth disparities, but just that we need to widen our vision. And finally, he speaks of the problem of leisure, what we just talked about, how we need to recognize a properly fulfilling major identity so that the new leisure we could create will be more than the new boredom of passive acquaintance manufactured by others. So let's quickly zoom through the 3 points. The first one is about equality, the roots of equality. We often speak of equality of opportunity or equality of outcome in our society today, but it must be insisted that equality in our culture arose in the West within a particular set of religious and philosophical ideas about a higher principle. This basis for equality seems to me the only adequate one because I cannot see why one should embark on the immensely difficult social practice of treating each person as important unless there is something intrinsically valuable about personality. And what is intrinsically valuable about a person except their freedom as moral agents? At the level of efficiency, it is surely more convenient to treat someone as having no importance, and thus build a society of inequality in which some people matter and some do not. So these are the main points regarding equality. Equality should be the central principle of society, since all persons, whatever their condition, must freely choose to live what is right or wrong. This act of choosing is the ultimate human act and is open to all. In this sense, all persons are equal, and differences of talent are of petty significance. Any man or woman, through choice, can achieve the good as much or more so than the cleverest or most powerful person that has ever lived. Because of this fact, no human being should be treated simply as a means, like a tree or a car, but only as an end. Our moral choices matter absolutely in the scheme of things. So any social order, whoops, pause. Any social order must then try to constitute itself within the recognition of this basic fact of moral personality which all equally possess. Regarding equality, it may be argued that although we should treat ourselves and others as of absolute worth, this does not apply equality in our day-to-day doings of life. Since a man is free to save his soul from mansion or slum, so his worldly condition is unimportant. Though the first part is true, the latter half must be categorically denied. It is likely to be spiritually bad for any person to be in a position of permanent and inevitable inferiority in his relation with anyone else. It is likely to be spiritually bad for any person to be in a position of unchecked superiority in his relationship with others. Relationships of superiority and subordination tend to thwart the true good of the people on either side. Because thwarting tends to occur, social policy should be directed away always to the elimination of such relations, whether at the factory, office, family, the general society, or the political order. Families require discipline, but if that discipline is not to degrade the children and the parents alike, it must be directed to its proper end of leading children to a freedom equal to that of their parents. Similarly, a factory may need a proper ordering of work by an authority, but that authority must not deny the equality of those ordered, or their creativity and responsibility for the work done. The end of which any society should be working for, however slow and difficult its accomplishment, is the elimination of these relations of superiority and subordination in all aspects of life. So this is just a little bit of what George Grant wrote, and we can see that we are a long ways from that. We've actually kind of regressed on that front, maybe. So regarding capitalism, George Grant argues that our capitalist system of incentives can no longer be said to lead to that encouragement of diversity of talents, which was its original justification. Equality of opportunity to serve GM or the Kraft Company is not what earlier Democrats meant by their doctrine. They no longer encourage that wide range of skillful activities which becomes increasingly our need in a mass society. Rather, what our present capitalist encourages is certain forms of activities, and usually vulgar, dehumanizing ones, at the expense of others. Finally, socialists needs to have a profound view of the human good. For example, we need to what can be done to cut to a minimum the dull and degrading aspects of work, to maximize the creative and the responsible part of work, and to stimulate education, and education in its broadest sense. Right? Education comes from, as George Grant says very often, education comes originally from the work from Plato's education, which was leading out to the order. So that's it. We need to stimulate education so that the new leisure will be more than the new boredom of passive acquaintance manufactured by others. So we also need to know what can be done to ensure that while cultivating the fullest equality, we do not produce a society of mediocrity and sameness, but one of quality and individuality in which the human spirit can truly flourish. To cultivate freedom for the individual without having it become identified with ruthless self interest, as it is now. As the above list infers, any socialist up to date with today's problems needs to have a profound view of the human good. So I realize that this presentation is quite rushed and I'm not presenting them in a very adequate way. Um, I'll eventually have to redo them, but I'm gonna probably maybe do one more presentation next week and then, I'm gonna have to stop. Right now I'm doing renovations and starting up my landscape maintenance business for this season. So the time just isn't there. So yeah, pretty soon it'll be on hold until the season comes around again. But the election is Monday, I believe, this Monday. So we'll see what we're gonna get, right? Is Mark Carney getting in? I, it all depends what they vote out, like in BC and all that. But over here, at least with our media, definitely seems like Carney could get in. All right.